Tension. You are now accessing classified files under the name Project Echo Archive 9. Omega Gamma classification. This information is non-public. Accessing it violates all security protocols. In the autumn of 1993, a covert governmental research unit, Project Echo, was dispatched to the abandoned Obsidian Lab, Sector Alpha 9. Their mission: investigate a catastrophic containment breach linked to reports of mass identity loss and temporal displacement. They were prepared for biological risks. They were not prepared for the parasitic entity known as the Mnemosyne Fragment, the entity that feeds on memory, identity, and the very concept of self. The last recovered audio and visual logs capture a terrifying truth. The Obsidian Lab was not merely breached. It was actively consuming the memories and identity of anyone who entered. The entity's presence was confirmed by a final transmission, a broken whisper that sounded like an echo from within the victims' own minds, urging them to forget who they were. This is not a ghost story. This is the full, unedited recording found sealed within the lab's deep vaulted server. The tapes contain raw audio logs, impossible visual distortion, and the team's ultimate realization that they were entering a psychological trap where their identity itself became the devil's prey. Once the entity takes hold, your mind is gone. Your self is gone. Fade to a still image. A faded photo of the brutalist-style concrete lab, looking derelict under a gray sky. The Obsidian Lab, a formidable, isolated structure, was shuttered in 1992 after the last research team vanished without a trace. The incident logged as mass cognitive collapse and unauthorized departure. Project Echo was led by Dr. Evelyn Reed, memory recall specialist, supported by Commander Elias Thorne, tactical specialist. Their mission: understand and neutralize the cognitive anomaly. The initial findings were clinical. Inside the lab, personal devices, digital recorders, comm units were malfunctioning, displaying impossible data, repeating timestamps, or simply failing. The real threat emerged when the team established their command center in the main server farm. All personnel reported the same phenomena: subtle but sweeping shifts in perception and recollection. Objects seemed familiar, then alien. Names felt wrong. Shadows deepened and twisted, momentarily forming shapes of forgotten faces. Dr. Reed noted in her preliminary log, "The lab isn't just tricking the senses. It's trying to convince us that our minds are unreliable. This is an assault on the core of our identity." This systematic assault on self-perception was the first sign that the Mnemosyne Fragment, the parasitic entity reported by Kronos Project reports, was active. The entity was subtly manipulating the lab's architecture by altering human memory of it. It wasn't changing physical space, but the recall of space, rendering prior observations untrustworthy. But the entity needed sustenance, and its next meal was the team's internal narrative of self. The anomaly began to personalize. Commander Thorne reported seeing a corridor physically identical to a terrifying, long-buried memory from his childhood. A dark, claustrophobic alley where he lost his younger brother. When he tried to enter it, the space seemed to stretch and twist, threatening to trap him in that forgotten trauma. Anya Sharma was suffering from localized memory deletion and visual hallucinations. Her perception was suddenly overlaying false images onto reality while simultaneously erasing her personal history. The climax of this phase occurred in the lab's central research chamber. The team gathered to deploy an anti-frequency device, but the room's design had radically shifted. What was once a large open area now resembled a narrow maze of impossible angles and shifting walls. They took steps, but their internal compass registered no movement. Here the entity finally revealed its mode of consumption. The Mnemosyne Fragment did not seek to destroy their bodies. It sought to consume their minds by creating cognitive loops of doubt, despair, and oblivion. Commander Thorne, upon seeing the impossible geometry and hearing whispers that echoed his forgotten traumas, suffered an immediate, catastrophic mental breakdown. The team was tearing itself apart, not by external demonic whispers, but by the malignant corruption of their internal sensory data and their personal history. Dr. Reed, isolated and struggling to maintain her identity, made a final desperate move. She grabbed the emergency radio and transmitted one last warning. The entity responded. The moment the radio signal attempted to leave the lab, the entire structure responded with an accelerated assault on their minds. The remaining moments of their investigation were instantly consumed by an overwhelming sensory load and the total erasure of their past. The camera logs show a brief, violent flash of pure white light. When the light receded, the geometry had fully collapsed into impossible, non-Euclidean space. The final phase of the Obsidian Lab paradox was documented in one brief loop recovered by the military retrieval team days later. The team found the lab structurally sound, but utterly empty. There was no trace of the team, the commander, or any specialized equipment. The only item recovered was a hidden AV recorder, found taped beneath a cracked floor panel in the server room. The loop was terrifying. The anomaly did not kill us, consumed our memories. The Mnemosyne Fragment took the identities we held. It erased who we were from this present moment. Who am I? I don't remember. Analysts noted that the entity's final act was not to murder them, but to retroactively erase their existence and personal history. The team never truly left the lab because the moments they occupied, and the selves they were after entering, simply ceased to exist in the perception of the outside world. As the chanting is heard, a voice, clearly Dr. Evelyn Reed's, is heard, calm and familiar, but the transcript confirms she is saying something she cannot possibly know, something terrifyingly tied to the future and utterly detached. The entity is contained. Project Echo took us in '93, but we successfully used the Mnemosyne Fragment to stabilize the current operation. Now we await the arrival of the next unit. We await Subject 007. I think that is what we call them. The final twist. The voice was Dr. Reed's, but she was speaking from an impossible future, confirming that the entity had not only erased the team's identities but had turned them into its instruments, or perhaps the instruments of the entity now controlling the fragment. Dr. Reed's final log suggests that the Obsidian Lab paradox was never about containment. It was about creating a stable, continuous trap, utilized by an unknown organization or the entity itself, to continue its operations, sacrificing successive teams to maintain the cognitive lock. The final question remains. If the lab consumes identity, and an unknown organization uses the lab, who is the devil truly working for? And when Subject 007 arrives, who will be recording their final, forgotten moments? And will they remember recording it? The childlike chanting slowly fades, replaced by the sharp, continuous tinnitus ringing. The ringing then slowly devolves into heavy, unrelenting VHS static, which finally cuts to black. The static briefly forms an impossible geometric shape, twisting and dissolving, before dissolving into a solid black screen. The last sound is a faint, distant whisper of a human voice, struggling to recall a name, then dissolving into the static.